Welcome everyone to tonight's webinar, Artificial Intelligence, AI, Democracy Disruptor. My name is Nicole Williams, and I'm a multimedia content creator and member of the League of Women Voters of Montgomery County, Maryland, a nonpartisan organization whose mission is to empower voters and defend democracy. One way I like to volunteer my time with the League is by being an active member on the Trending Topics Committee. This Trending Topics webinar is one of many ways we work to provide civic education and voter services to inform the public about important issues. This show topic was one that I submitted for the vote at our annual meeting. Support for our program and voter services comes from viewers like you. We appreciate every like, every share, and invite your donations so that we can continue to provide high-quality trending topics webinars and other civic educational events to the public and our members at no charge. Tonight, our presenters will discuss how locally and nationally we can better understand the disinformation and security challenges posed by the expanding use of artificial intelligence during election season. Some of the issues we hope our speakers will touch on include the potential for AI-generated deepfakes, fake images or videos of people or events to mislead or manipulate voters in ways that may affect election outcomes. Some of the strategies being explored to protect our elections and democracy, and will they be enough? How can we become more aware of the true nature of AI-generated threats and not succumb to cynicism? And finally, how can we be sure we're finding and using reliable election information? Before we welcome our presenters, some housekeeping details. This meeting is being recorded and streamed live to YouTube. The recording will be available immediately after this webinar finishes being live streamed. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, share and like this video to help us inform others. Follow us on Meta's Facebook and Instagram and X, formerly Twitter, turning on all notifications for the latest updates. The audience has been muted and the chat box has been disabled to minimize distractions. An audience Q&A session will begin when the speakers' presentations have concluded. To submit a question, click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type your question in the box, then hit send. We will answer as many questions as time allows. Our program is scheduled to end at 8:30 p.m. Now I'm pleased to introduce tonight's speakers. First, ALEXIS SERFATY, Geotechnology Director at Eurasia Group, advising clients on today's most complex and relevant technology policy issues and helping shape outcomes on consumer trust in technology, trade, and national security. Prior to joining Eurasia Group, ALEXIS was the Director of Global Public Policy at a leading public affairs firm and earlier served as an advisor in the Office of Secretary of Transportation, representing the Department of Transportation's interest in the U.S.-China strategic and economic dialogue. Next, we have BORIS BRAJKOVIC, Election Director of the Montgomery County Board of Elections, is responsible for the overall administration of elections in the county. BRAJKOVIC joined the Board of Elections staff in 2020 as a trainer for the Election Judge Program and was promoted later that year to manage the Voter Services Division, which handles voter registration and mail-in ballots. Prior to joining the Board of Elections, BRAJKOVIC served as the National Chief of Governance Programs for the Organizations for Security and Cooperations in Europe, that's the OSCE, missions to Bosnia and Herzegovina, there we go, where he managed 33 team members and designed its long-term pragmatic strategy focused on good governance, institutional development, civic engagement, and conflict prevention. Now it's my pleasure to invite ALEXIS SERFATY to begin tonight's program.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And Boris, it's a pleasure to be with everyone this evening. I really look forward to our conversation and what I hope will be a spirited discussion and Q&A on an obviously important and timely topic. I'm going to try to get my slide presentation loaded up here. If you bear with me for 1 second. Hopefully we can get this. There we are. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully in a few moments you can all see the deck.
I can see it. Let's see.
How's that looking?
It seems it's vertically challenged. Can you widen the window? There you go.
All right, great.
Okay.
Let's just get this going here. All right, great. So again, thank you, Nicole. And everyone, it's a pleasure to be with you. We're here to talk about the upcoming US elections, but I think to help frame our topic around AI, I actually want to start on the other side of the world in Seoul, South Korea. Last week, US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken spoke at the Summit for Democracy. His speech there warned the country's delegations, folks in the audience, about a quote unquote pending flood of malicious disinformation that threatens the world's democracies. Disinformation that's fueled in large part by the rise of artificial intelligence. And Blinken's speech was obviously tailored to his audience, in this case, basically a global group of visiting countries. But it's obviously a timely reminder about what we face here at home. And just like in the US, about half of the world's population this year, almost all of them democracies, or at least most of them democracies, are also holding a critical election. And just like the United States, they face, as the secretary said at this conference, a pending flood of malicious disinformation, to use his words. So again, this is an incredibly timely conversation on an issue that's not just that's impacting not just us here in the DMV, but literally billions of people around the world. I'm going to change my slide here. So, by way of background, my job at Eurasia Group is to help organizations, to help people understand the world, including the US, and specifically what's risky about it. So, safe to say, we've been pretty busy this year, unfortunately, but Eurasia Group is a political risk firm, help run the company's technology practice group. So you can imagine in that context, our focus for this year has been on AI broadly and on disinformation specifically. And to put that in a bit of context, how we view it, every year we release a top risks report. This is basically an annual prediction of the 10 most consequential political risks that we think are most likely to occur over the course of a given year. And for 2024, we decided to put artificial intelligence as our fourth highest risk after, as you can imagine, number one, the US political system. And we titled that risk Ungoverned AI. Ungoverned AI. The reason we call it that, and the reason that we think this technology is a risk, is that it's developing far faster than our ability to govern it. And I don't want to take away, I think personally, AI is a net positive. I think a lot of the upsides, a lot of the benefits are going to actually start materializing this year for consumers, for companies, basically in every economic sector. But from a legal standpoint, a regulatory standpoint, we need to be realistic about how little we can actually accomplish in an environment where the technology is moving so much faster than the governance can, than our ability to collectively monitor it and regulate it. And that's especially true this year in 2024 in an election year. And so what that means for us, or at least what that means in terms of this risk with AI, is that there are two kind of major risks associated with it. The first is disinformation, which is going to be driven to a greater and greater degree as actors have more tools. And I'm thinking in this case of like Chat GPT, as that comes online, there are just more tools for malicious actors to drive disinformation during an election across the platform. The second is proliferation, and it's the ability, um, the ability to actually deploy AI actors in across asymmetric attacks. So the ability for malicious actors, whether they're other countries, whether they're kind of other campaigns, um, the platforms by which, the frequency by which they can launch these disinformation efforts. And all this is happening just as our political system here at home in the US is more dysfunctional than basically any other advanced industrial democracy, than any of those other countries I mentioned that are also holding elections this year. I'm going to go to the next slide here. So the US political system is deeply divided. We all know that. It's basically why we're here. Public trust in core institutions, Congress, the judiciary, the media. Trust in all those institutions is at historic lows. Polarization, partisanship are all at historic highs. Americans, for the most part, no longer believe in a common set of settled facts. And all this is happening just as disinformation is quickly adapting to new technologies. So, of course, you know, misleading content isn't new. Propaganda dates back, I assume, hundreds of years. It's not a new thing to elections specifically, but social media platforms have provided a really powerful new vehicle for interference efforts by people, by actors, whether, like I said, they're other countries, by a rogue super PAC, whomever. And several key shifts, I think, in the types of content that influence disinformation are also happening. The first is basically the ease with which content is doctored or repurposed to kind of imply an alternative reality. And in some cases, that could involve overlaying computer graphics with real footage. So, for example, you might have selectively edited footage of President Biden or Donald Trump that makes them look weak or implies that they've made some sort of gaffe. I'm sure they'll both do a pretty solid job of making gaffes, but you can imagine the content, the fake content that you can create around those efforts and the impact that it can have on people's opinions. And then meanwhile, you have increasingly sophisticated bots that are flooding social media with propaganda and false narrative. It could be either just by sharing disinformation online through these platforms, or just trolling legitimate posts and adding adding uncertainty to what is factual and legitimate. And so bringing us back to AI as this kind of top risk that I mentioned, the advent of generative AI hasn't helped. I mentioned GPT-5 coming online now soon. And so it's much easier now to create artificial content. And deep fakes in the meantime are only going to get better. So policymakers are going to have to prepare themselves as we get increasingly closer to November. There is some good news, though. That was a bit of some of what I said was kind of dark, and I don't want to leave us with the time that we have left without the good news and without some trends that are around the corner that I think are going to be positive. For one, in my opinion, from what I've seen, the debate around disinformation, around AI, has actually seen a lot of really positive public-private collaboration, cooperation between federal government, state governments, and the private sector companies. We've actually seen industry take a lot of important steps, I think, toward combating election deepfakes, or at least trying to. Last month at a conference in Germany, the Munich Security Conference, over 20 technology companies signed what's called the Tech Accord. It's pretty specific. Tech Accord to combat deceptive use of AI in 2024 elections. That was a lot of usual suspect big tech companies, Microsoft, Google, Meta, OpenAI, all coming together, agreeing to a set of voluntary commitments that are designed to counter deep fakes specifically, and anything that's going to, theoretically deceive voters or influence political campaigns. On top of that, even in the absence of federal legislation, a number of U.S. states have taken upon themselves to pass laws that are directly related to AI, related to election integrity, and dozens more have proposed new legislation this year, including in some swing states, some of which may actually pass before November. So momentum there as well. And then in the meantime, within the Biden administration, the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, has actually made it illegal to make a call, like a campaign call, a robocall with AI-generated content, with AI-generated technology, I should say. And that's in response to a controversy a couple of months back about a Biden robocall that was AI-generated. So, the threats of disinformation, of misinformation in this year's elections are very real. They're definitely exacerbated by AI technology, but I really think forums like this help provide a better understanding of the security challenges. And a lot of folks, as I mentioned, in and out of government, federal level, state level, corporations, and also including at the league right now, are working really hard to limit those risks. So I remain positive, and I'll stop there and just looking forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you very much, Alexis. It's a lot of great information there. Let's see here. There you go. Thank you. All right. So now I will invite Boris BRAJKOVIC to present.
Good evening, and many thanks to Nicole and great partners from League of Women Voters of Montgomery County for having me tonight, for giving me an opportunity just to share a few words about what we are doing at the local level to address some concerns that Alexis presented that are across the globe and that are reaching every corner of the earth. Let me start by pointing on something that Alexis said. He said, we have to be ready for November. We have to be ready for April. So April 1st, 120,000 of our voters in our county will have their mail-in ballots on the way to receive them. Every election matter, primary election or general elections. So it's not necessarily the result who wins, but integrity of the election process has to be sustained to any elections that we as an agency, as a board, as a department, as a group of people who live and breathe election every day, what we need to do. AI is new. AI is coming to every sphere of public life. AI will have influence on the political campaigns, which is one set of issues. And another set of issues is election process. And we are guardians of that process, or at least try to perceive ourselves not alone, again, with the partners like League of Women Voters and other groups that are trying to preserve the election integrity and engagement in election every day. It's how we address on the local level something that is, as Alexis properly pointed out, is either state or national or a global issue. What we do and what we try to implement is actually not to be a static agency, but agency that is able to adapt, agency that is able to recognize the changes in the society, changes in the voters' preferences, and try to meet them in the best possible way. We are the agency that does a lot of outreach. We do outreach in person, we do outreach across the social platforms, because that is what our constituency expects from us. This finding a way to marry the old way with the new way is a challenge. But I think that we are managing. We are listening and we are adapting as we go. That is one certainly way to go. We are present in person, as I said. We are present on social platforms, and we build partnerships as we go. The question that I was asked once is, how do we judge the value or importance of the partnerships or contributions that are made? There are different ways to judge. But for me, the fact that we are partners with someone for 10, 15 years speaks a volume. The partnerships that sustain over time, because there's a common focus, which is, in this sense, elections itself, voter participation, engagement, just like the keywords for the League of Women Voters. We cannot stop. Our engagement spreads in both non-election year and election year alike. We do our best to reach out to everyone, because we want to remain the household name agency. We want people to know that Board of Elections is the trusted source of information. We had over 220 events in non-election year. We will hit over 300 this year. And we will try to reach anyone who has been with us, who's been our voter for a long time, or anyone who is new. We live in a big county, we live in a dynamic county. County where every day someone is turning 16. Every day someone is moving to our county. Every day someone is becoming a naturalized citizen in our county. So all of these angles have to be taken into account and continue what we do. I agree that any policy solutions will be highly debatable among the policymakers. They'll be part of the debate on different levels, but the work will remain on the ground. The work will remain with the Board of Elections. The work will remain with the League of Women Voters. This is where that contact will be established, where it will be sustained. To which extent we can address issues that will potentially flood social media, that will flood radio, TV, or any other outlet, is again, depends on our capacity and our readiness or the ability to adapt. How to localize solutions, to which extent they can be translated from one jurisdiction to another, is something that we are looking at. How to open additional channels of communication and address any potential misinformation before it spreads is what is our priority. We have to recognize the fact that there will be misinformation. There will be misinformation that, as Alexis rightly pointed out, that will aim to hurt one political campaign or another. But that is one sphere. Election day, how to become a voter, how to register, how to vote, how to learn more. These are these are the pieces of information that we will guard, that we will push for. Again, there will be a mismatch in capacity at some point if AI or any other actors flood any particular area. And that it will be a subject, I believe, of policy solutions that will be discussed and potentially adopted at some point. But for now, the work cannot stop. The work cannot stop. And every day, in different forums, forum like this, in different outlets, whether social media or personal contact, we have to continue. We have to sustain the flow of information, its accuracy, and above all, timeliness. Any information that is after the fact, that it's kind of loses its own value. So this is very briefly for me. As I said, we are on our effort, maybe we are trying to marry the old ways and the new ways. So Alexis presented something with the presentation online. I didn't, I just speak. But I just would like this conversation to be a starting point for any subsequent talk where right address for the right information, right address is identified where the right information could be captured. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Boris. And I actually want to thank both of you for pointing out the importance of the upcoming elections and not just skipping to November. And so because of that, I will share a couple of things regarding the elections. So the deadline to register is April 23rd. So you want to update your name, your address, and political party by April 23rd. The primary election day is Tuesday, May 14th. Voters may vote in person from Thursday, May 2nd to Thursday, May 9th at one of the 14 early voting centers across Montgomery County. To vote by mail, you want to apply for your ballot, and it must be mailed, which will be mailed to you by May 7th. And I will go ahead and just put some helpful links in the chat to help you get vote ready. Okay, now, again, this was a very informative presentations. And for those watching live, if you've learned something new tonight, show your appreciation with a like. I certainly learned a lot and look forward to the replay. Now it's time for the Q&A portion of the evening, which I will kick off by sharing this short clip that inspired my question. So let me go ahead and do that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and play that.
Artificial intelligence, we talk about it a lot on this show, how it's changing, its potential. Tonight, how it's being used in politics. Some videos have depicted made-up futures. Other deep fakes have made it sound like a candidate is saying something that the candidate never said.
America, you blame me for interfering with your democracy, but I don't have to. You are doing it to yourselves.
We're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time, even if they would never say those things.
Our great national anthem. Baby shark doo 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 doo, baby shark doo 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 doo, baby shark.
These are not the best current examples, but to use current examples, we'd be taking the bait of their creators. Instead, we'd like to talk about this minefield with Danielle Citrin, professor of law at the University of Virginia Law School. Professor, thank you. We should also note that Danielle is also the author of the book, Fight for Privacy, Protecting Dignity, Identity, and Love in the Digital Age. So, Professor, we've been wrestling with misinformation and disinformation for a while. What's the additional harm from artificial intelligence and the use of deep fakes with respect to the matter of just truth?
You know, they come at a time, you know, they're getting hyper realistic, and the technology that enables us to make them is, you know, spreading far and wide. And so it's at a time, of course, when trust in our institutions, trust in each other is at an all-time low. And so in many respects, we're both primed to believe information, of course, that confirms our biases. And if it's information that's negative and novel about important institutions, including politicians, then we're going to be even more likely to believe what our eyes and ears are telling us, even though the video may not be, may be completely synthetic, a made up video or audio of a politician doing and saying something awful, right, the night before an election. The risk is that that well-timed deepfake can sort of turn the tide of who shows up to vote.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing there. All right. So I wanted to share that one so the audience could get an idea of what deepfakes actually look like. And two, I wanted to point out how in this video she mentions a well-timed deepfake the night before an election could turn the tide of who shows up to vote. Now, being able to, self-correct after seeing a deepfake that aligns with our biases, or not being able to, I should say, is concerning. So my question is, what are your thoughts about a law that would prevent political attack ads from being aired, 1 or even 2 weeks, before an election day? This law would prohibit candidate sponsored attack ads, AI generated or real, from being aired on TV, radio, podcasts, and their social networks and websites. Similar to what Facebook did in 2020, where they had a nationwide pause on electoral and political ads. Any thought on that idea in an ideal world? Either one of you.
Yeah, Nicole, I think it's a great question. I'd love to see, rather than a law that is maybe overly broad in terms of its application, in terms of what, could be allowed from an advertising standpoint or not, I'd love to see all of these technology and social media platforms collectively agree on some sort of set of guidelines like what you mentioned, some sort of deadline by which you can no longer post specific types of ads. I think we'll see the extent to which deepfake specifically is obviously a major concern. There's not a lot of evidence yet that we have as to how it and obviously, tries to manipulate voters, but there's not a lot of evidence as to like what those results have been. But we are seeing the federal government move, especially around audio deepfakes. I mentioned the fake Biden robocall. I think on the audio portion, they're definitely moving as quickly as they can, relatively speaking, to try to address that.
Okay. Boris?
Just maybe to reiterate again, as an agency that is tasked to deliver fair, unbiased elections, we focus on the elections part of the overall process. I indicated at the very beginning that there is a role for AI in the political campaign sphere and election administration itself. So election campaigns and the interactions between campaigns is something that Board of Elections does not take a stand on. Our role is administration of elections itself. We would like to have as high turnout as possible. We would like to see political campaigns, non-governmental groups, community groups, churches, anyone to work towards engagement of voters, and to have, as a resident or as a father, as someone who lives here, to have campaigns that would inspire towards that direction, and have a discussion about ideas, proposals, something that would engage people, and they would come to the voting place or request mail-in ballot. Again, so as an agency, political campaigns are not necessarily in our focus. We don't look at that. We are trying to be the guardians and administrators of the election process, where people actually exercise their right based on whatever opinion they formulate after listening to all the campaigns and that what they have to say.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, now I will turn the program over to Darcy Fair for the audience Q&A. Darcy?
You, Nicole. As a reminder for those listening today, you can ask your questions by going to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen and hit send or return. The questions will be visible after they're answered, though, so keep that in mind. We also ask that all attendees be respectful of our presenters and of each other. Our scheduled program is expected to end at 8:30 today, so we have plenty of time for questions and Q&A, so we hope to have some good discussion going. I see we've had a few questions come in. So the first one looks to be for Boris. Could you talk about what you're most concerned with in Montgomery County for AI? And then Alexis, if you have anything afterwards, feel free to jump in.
The way I see Montgomery County is a very advanced county itself. We have a population that prefers doing their business, let's say, online. I think that a good example is that the last 2 election cycles, we mail in application to every single voter in our county, yet majority of them request mail-in ballot online. They literally receive the paper and still go online to fill out the application. That's the new thing. That's the fact of life. In the same time, I believe that we have engaged population, and I believe that any information that we can supply or keep supplying on ongoing basis will work in favor of addressing any negative impacts that AI could have potentially in the county. So we don't live in some corner that it does not attract interest. We are a big county. We are 17% of voters of the state of Maryland. If there is a county that has sufficient number of voters, a population to make a difference, that is Montgomery County. But I really believe in our voters, in the voter education work that is being done consistently, and I believe that as a county, as a society for itself, there will be a certain pushback against any misinformation that might flood in the run-up to elections.
Thank you for that.
Sorry, I think I saw one question, and maybe I need to state and to add something. Our website is 777vote.org, and all the information about the elections is available there. So it's easy to remember, and I hope that everyone will start to use it a lot. So please, 777vote.org. Thank you.
Thank you. That's helpful for those who are also on the YouTube channel right now. We put that in the chat, which folks in the Zoom can see, but I'm not sure they can see it on the YouTube. So thank you. Alexis, we have a question for you. You mentioned the voluntary commitment to counter deep fakes by the 20 tech companies. How are you seeing this play out? Have they made any concrete commitments beyond the generalization that they commit to tackling misinformation from AI?
It's a great question, and it's always it's easy to agree on something. It's a lot harder to actually implement and kind of hold their feet to the fire, so to speak. But they did actually, aside from the agreed upon commitment that I mentioned, there are, I think, 8 specific actions that they agreed to take. Again, this is over 20 technology companies, IBM, TikTok, Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, Snap, etc. So some of those, I don't know off the top of my head, but some of those 8 commitments they agreed to make were like uh, working together to make cross-industry resilience around content, around deceptive content. So they're actually going to try to develop and implement new technology individually and then with amongst themselves that would help mitigate risks. And that would include the use of open source tools that they could apply. Trying to detect the distribution of content on their platforms. So I think trying to be a little more transparent about some of the deceptive content that's being distributed across their platforms. More transparency, and I think generally kind of trying to support more efforts around education that kind of foster public awareness, or I think the term used was media literacy. So just like we're kind of increasingly trying to train people, everyday consumers, around cyber security hygiene, getting to a place where there's a common practice around this kind of I guess deep fake or deceptive AI election content hygiene, so to speak.
On top of that, a little bit more, we've had a few questions come in regarding identification of deep fakes, right, of misinformation. And the question is, how do you recognize it? But also, are there efforts underway with CISA or the FBI, for example, to work on identification of AI-generated deepfakes, videos, pictures, etc.?
I think that's the challenge that I think everyone is working through in real time. They're more challenging to create, and so once an actor has been able to once an actor has been able to create this video, this kind of really elaborately choreographed fraud, so to speak, it risks having a genuine impact on voters. But I think at this point, it's actually a little early. Real, like, widely circulated AI generated content that's disinformation, video disinformation, isn't quite, I think, sophisticated enough to have a real widespread political impact. I think, again, one of the main concerns is really audio deepfakes, and this would go to be concerned for Montgomery County as well, because they're technically easier to produce. It's sound, it's not visual, and they're actually kind of harder to debunk. Not just like on a technical level. There are some things in deepfakes that you can on the video side that you can see. We saw in the clip that Cole played. It didn't quite pass the sniff test if you're really thinking critically. But with audio deepfakes, a lot harder to discern, both at a technical and psychological level. You can even think about, like, putting in a real world example. If you had trouble understanding like a voicemail, it's just I think a lot easier to trick people using some of these audio deepfakes than it is with the video deepfakes. So that would be more a concern for me personally.
We appreciate your insight. We know that this is a rapidly changing area, and we're all learning as we go. And we don't all have the answers just aren't apparent yet, right? And at a lot of levels. So thank you for trying to tackle some of these higher level questions. We have another question that came in for Boris regarding Montgomery County Board of Elections. If there's some sort of rumor control system on the state Board of Elections, there's also questions if there's any groups within Montgomery County Board of Elections to tackle AI-generated misinformation already.
So rumors are not, they're not something new for the election process, right? There's a lot of misunderstanding about the election process, and the rumor control that is as a web page that is driven by the State Board of Elections. It's available on our website. In addition to that, we do provide our own comments on everything that we see as repeated or frequent question among the voters in our county. There are, as I said in the very opening, it's about being timely. It's about utilizing the moment to address the issue as it evolves. Yes, we are present on social media. We try to utilize that a lot. We try to address the issues on our website. We are also moving to some new areas that were maybe not that much answered before. For example, we would like to invite all our voters when they register or when they update their voter registration to share their email address and their phone number with us, because that's how we can communicate quickly. We can, through our county system, we can generate and send hundreds of thousands of emails in a very short period of time. We are rolling out texting system as well. We can target those numbers at certain precincts, at certain polling places where certain misinformation could be spreading out. So we are doing on our part to be preemptive if possible. However, as I said, there's also a part where we need a voters' engagement as well, because I don't know how many of you are registered voters with Montgomery County, how many of you left your email address with us. If you did, most likely in recent weeks, you got some emails from us reminding you about election dates, options to update your information, how to stay up to date on everything. That's the way forward. So exploring new ways, introducing them, and being timely.
Boris, I had another question that came in along these lines, and it's talking about specifically combating false reports of closed or unavailable polling centers. I don't know if you have any thoughts on, one, if that's happened in Montgomery County at all, but also, again, are there ways to prevent such information and what you do about it?
I'm not sure that was a history of Montgomery County, and I'm not sure that we can necessarily prevent anyone posting something online. I think that the framework, the backbone of proper information has to be done before the election day. So if you hear information that polling place is closed, just go to our website, just call us, just go to our social media agency. Again, it is, if we wait to election day to start addressing what people should do, I think we dropped the ball. And that's the reason, as I said at the very beginning, our work cannot stop. It's ongoing, has to be done in equally election and non-election year. We cannot be reactive, we have to be proactive. We learn from our surrounding, we learn from the county, we learn from other jurisdictions. That's the only way forward. We cannot be a static agency.
Thank you. And again, we put the link in the chat so everybody can check out the website. Alexis, we have a number of questions coming in for you. The next one is, when individuals work with the tech companies, are there some international standards like ISO or IEC that could be used for AI?
That's a really good question. So I mentioned that one of the silver linings was what I've seen as real positive public-private collaboration around this issue. I think if you compare AI and disinformation, the debate around it now and over the last year compared with, for example, the privacy debate from which may have started like a decade ago, it's pretty night and day. With privacy, consumers basically didn't really care. They still kind of don't. And there wasn't any clamor for regulation, for legislation, even for just policy initiatives. And there was also, and kind of remains, very little cooperation between governments, either at the state or federal level, and the platforms, the technology companies that are responsible or not responsible for protecting a user's data. And I think with AI, it's actually been almost the opposite, where you've had a groundswell of consumer interest and concern in what this emerging technology is going to mean across a range of issues, not just disinformation. And governments at the federal level, the state level have responded to that and are trying, I think, earnestly to develop sound policy, laws, etc. And I think there's good, as I mentioned, collaboration with the platforms, the technology companies that are developing, relatively good, that are developing these AI tools and products, and that have the same, in some ways, same fears, like around disinformation, right? And so the point I'm getting to is that this is also taking place at the multinational and the multilateral level. The United Nations has an AI kind of risk working group or secretariat that has just released a UN approved statement, and that they voted on as a body, hundreds of nations. And there are other groups at the multilateral level. It's like the G7, UN, the OECD, other multilateral fora that are exploring this use of standards. Just like, again, we did with the privacy debate. What are the, if it's not US standards or European standards, what is going to be like a good set of best practices? And with privacy, we saw Europe kind of race ahead with GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. Other markets try to emulate that law, that regulation, usually not as effectively. The US still doesn't have any federal privacy legislation. I think even though the EU is now the first kind of with this similarly big piece of global regulation, the AI Act, other countries are trying to implement similar bits of federal legislation to help, safeguard consumer interest around AI, while at the same time, I think, genuinely working at a multilateral level with other countries to develop the best set of global practices, which may include some of the standards that the questioner mentioned.
Thank you. So this question is for whoever feels like answering it. Assuming there will be a lot of scrutiny at the national level during the upcoming national election, is there a concern that there will be less scrutiny of election ads at the local or congressional levels?
I have some thoughts. I don't know, Boris, if you want to.
It's again, you will understand that as election director of a public agency, again, we stay away from the campaigns. Maybe caveat here, this perception of national elections versus local elections. We have a day when elections are held across all the states and territories. This is where people go out and vote for the presidents, for the college, for the Congress, for the Senate. So it's local matters. That's what I'm trying to say, like local matter. You cannot necessarily separate one from another, but I believe that local plays a big role in all of this.
Yeah, and I would just answer like not necessarily. I think you've seen in the absence of federal movement, there've been executive orders and things, but in the absence of federal legislation, you've seen states move quickly to address some of these issues, and I think municipalities and governments at the local level can also move quickly as well as and if needed. So there's definitely some concern there, but I think there's also potential to actually move faster than governments are at the national level.
So as we talk about misinformation and how AI is contributing to misinformation, in terms of the general public, how accessible are AI tools?
They're in general for like malicious. I mean, so they're very accessible because now with like ChatGPT 4 and ChatGPT 5 and 6, which will come online soon, which will dwarf in comparison what is possible with 4. These are all, anyone essentially can use these tools, and so the ease with which one can develop, disingenuous information, whether it's video or audio, it's widely accessible. On the other hand, you can do it for you can, in the same way, you can use AI tools to safeguard against illicit users, to kind of weed out what is real and what's not. So that can work both ways, essentially, just like most any other technology or emerging technology.
You just answered my second question, which was how accessible are the tools for detection?
So I think there would be both. So I mean, obviously that could be at the user level, but really that would probably be up to, it goes back a little bit to, so private sector, it goes back to those, an example of what those 20 companies could do jointly. I think there are initiatives to develop new technologies that do just that in an organized way, and help voters, help consumers distinguish and differentiate. And then again, yes, like US, similarly, civil society, like the League, and then also governments will also have to do the same eventually.
We have a question that's on the converse. We've been talking mostly about concerns, challenges, but we have an opportunity question, which is, could artificial intelligence be used to help better demonstrate what happens to ballots after they're cast? Can we also use AI to understand what happens with absentee votes, how votes get counted? So more of the, can we use AI for analytics?
That's basic. Yes, that is what AI is ostensibly used for. It's collecting to make AI work. To make an AI application work, you need as much data as is humanly possible, and so the more data around, say, absentee voting and those other issues that you would have would help get tremendous, build pretty tremendous predictive models, scenarios around what would be likely to happen or not happen.
May I just add very briefly here? I spent 15, 16 years of my life working on the good governance, and any definition that you will find or any white paper on it, you cannot avoid terms that are like openness, transparency, inclusion, engagement, and things like that. I work at the agency and under the board that thrives on openness and engagement. It is on our end to provide as much information about all those items that you listed, whether it's vote by mail, what happens to my ballot, how is my ballot counted, that people, I hope, will pick up and they will use it in an educational manner. So information has to be generated on our end, and I believe that for some time now, we provide a lot, and we open up, we embrace anyone's engagement. We live in a county that live streams its canvas. We live in a county that live stream scanning of its ballot, manual audit, every board meeting, like everything is there. So it's used for the good cause, for educational purposes. I believe that the information is coming from the board of elections, and I hope it will end up being used for the good purposes to educate the voters and strengthen the process.
Thank you both. We have some more questions coming in regarding how to protect your personal data and regarding privacy, where there's AI-driven campaigns that rely on targeted advertising techniques. Are there ways that consumers that use social media can help protect themselves or take steps to prevent that personal data and privacy?
I can't speak to, specifically like Montgomery County per se, but, I think you need to be you need to kind of read the fine print behind what a specific platform does or does not do with your personal data, and ensure that you have the right kind of safeguards kind of set up, essentially.
Great, thank you. Next question is about voter registration. So how would a voter add their email address and phone number to their voter registration record? So Boris, this is for you.
The question, 777vote.org, or if you have your phone with you, please text the word update to 77788. Again, word update to 77788, and just follow the links, follow the process. You can always text the word check to 77788 and to see your current voter registration. And you can go from there as well to update to your residential address, mailing address, party affiliation. You can add additional details. So again, this is exactly the type of support that we hope to receive and we've been receiving from Montgomery County voters.
Thank you. So Alexis, I have another question for you. It builds off of 2 questions ago, talking about privacy. The question is, how are companies and organizations collecting and aggregating data to build digital twins? And what are the legal and ethical considerations that need to be taken into account?
So this basically goes at the heart of what future federal legislation would look like. A big part of that, a big part of any piece of AI legislation would include language around data, obviously, and privacy. Unfortunately, so nothing will happen this year, obviously, around that. There's still one of the main kind of elephant in the room is that there's still no federal privacy legislation in the United States, and that has kind of a tremendous impact. Well, companies like Facebook and X, formerly Twitter, these are obviously multinational platforms that have users in all around the world, and most of those places have their own kind of national legislation around privacy and data protection, and that creates issues when as data moves across borders from the U.S. to Europe and elsewhere. And so, at this point, the companies are your data. I mean, I think the way that I would look at it is, I mean, your data is safe within the United States, right? But we need overarching federal AI legislation to ensure that it remains so, especially again as data moves across borders.
Along those lines, can you say anything regarding the new EU AI regulations as they relate to election integrity?
Yes. So I mentioned before, similar to GDPR and the General Data Protection Regulation that the EU implemented about 5, 6, 7 years ago, the EU has just passed a significant, very comprehensive new law. It's essentially the first jurisdiction to really comprehensively regulate AI. It's called the AI Act. It was actually drafted really before the explosion of ChatGPT, so it doesn't quite do as much to kind of regulate and oversee that aspect of the technology as much, including disinformation. But it is again, like at this point, the world's most comprehensive national law. The EU is not national, but kind of national law. And there are a lot of countries around the world, including like India, for example, but then also states within the US, like California, that are looking to the AI Act to try to mimic some of the requirements, some of the language. The issue now is, so the law's been approved, but it hasn't been fully implemented. And so, like AI itself, a lot of it's going to be a long-term process just in terms of like implementing the law, in terms of staffing, in terms of this new kind of highly complex governance structure. Different member states within the EU are going to have to set up agencies to implement the regulation, and they might take occasionally differing views. So it's an important first step. It's an important law, but again, the tricky part is in the actual enforcement across 27 member states. And I think trying to kind of going back to the standards question, they still need basically technical standards, new technical standards to underpin the law, and those aren't going to be ready for a few years. So it's kind of reflective of what I mentioned in my remarks, that the technology is going to move much, much, much faster than any regulation can. And so even with the EU, with the European Union, which has basically been a first mover from a legislative standpoint, that they're not even going to be able to enforce the law with actual underlying standards for like another 2 or 3 years. And at that point, you can only imagine like how far AI has already advanced. And now here in the US, we don't even have federal legislation at all. So it's a tricky balance with with drafting legislation and enacting legislation that actually works. And that's why it's not just about one single law. It's about what civil society organizations do, what states do, what municipalities do, what the private sector does, and then what we as consumers of this information and as citizens do as well.
Could you maybe provide some more insight on how AI is going to, or maybe perhaps not going to, but enables misinformation compared to the way that misinformation is already circulating or has been circulating on social media prior to the accessibility of AI tools?
Yeah, I think it's about, like you said, so misinformation has been spreading for like, yeah, I mean, campaigns, we've seen this for 100 years, and Boris alluded to that as well. But it's in terms of I think like the volume, right? So AI is going to enable a higher rate of misinformation. Social media platforms are like the perfect host for this virus, basically. And AI um, will speed up the rate at which disinformation is spread. And then the second is that it just provides more tools to malicious actors to be able to do the same. Whether those actors are other countries. I mean, it's a legitimate like national. We see like movement from Russia, from China, to spread some of this at the national level, but then also just like could be folks in other campaigns that do it at a different level.
On those lines, are other technologies such as 5G enabling real-time data and processing even more so? So I get the question is, are there other technologies out there that are also helping to advance AI, such as 5G?
I mean, I think it's part of like 5G is part of the broader 5G and eventually 6G, part of the broader um, hardware and infrastructure ecosystem that speeds the processing of data. And so, in that sense, it does add fuel to the fire. But I think AI and generative AI specifically is unique in its ability um, to to create the content and then spread it more quickly.
Mhm. Do you have any examples of where AI has been used to manipulate public opinion or voter sentiment in the past elections?
We have seen some in other countries. So I believe in Brazil, for instance, um, there's been use of of there's been use of generative AI to create kind of disinformation campaigns. I mean, like I think there've been a number of video deepfakes in Hong Kong. I think in other areas where in that case, maybe not around elections specifically, but around really highly elaborate and choreographed fraud. So there has been some, yeah, there have been examples of real world damage that are starting to emerge. I think the impact that disinformation through video deepfakes has yet to be fully seen specific to elections, and we'll probably have more if we reconvened a year from now. We'll have some more information, for better or worse.
Mhm. So I invite others to ask questions. We have about 15 more minutes, but we did have one more just come in. The question is, how do we assess new technologies that are not potentially positive when it's coming to the market? The previous thought was perhaps AI will be as unintended as the internet was when that first hit the market.
That's actually a good question. I'm just well, it's why we have um, agencies like the Federal Trade Commission, um, that monitor the impact a technology or a company would have on consumers, on citizens. Um, but effectively once a new technology as kind of groundbreaking as AI broadly is, you know, is naturally going to lead to trepidation from citizens and from consumers. It's always been the case, and that's why we, you know, have agencies that try to oversee, if not through regulation and laws, then through policy. But different countries have different regulatory systems. The U.S. does have one that is a little bit more, you know, amenable to letting new technologies and letting new businesses come to market before they're necessarily regulated. So there is some risk there.
We have another question come in. This is for Boris. What can the Board of Elections do in a situation that there's a last-minute deep fake that spreads on social media that may deter people from going to the polls to vote, such as having something that was, you know, really egregious, like a mass shooting event at a polling place? What could the Board of Elections do in such a situation? Is it possible to extend hours of voting if such a situation were to occur?
So let's there are a few angles here. Number one, outrageous example because it's possible, because this is type of example that will actually make people think. Again, it's on us to be timely. It's on voters to go to the trusted source of information, and then it's on the system, including the courts, or to look at the issue of whether extending hours or not. Extending hours is an option that is provided in the election law. The reasoning behind the request, who generates it, how it's addressed, is a different thing. But again, it's we have to do work before the election. So anything that comes up as a outrageous news that will make people stop and think whether they should go in person and vote, go to our website, reach out to your board of elections. And there's another angle about traditionally this last minute before the election day news that impacts the elections. At the very opening of today's event, I mentioned that 120,000 ballots will be mailed out next week. That's the growing number. So our elections are not election day only. What we have to pay attention is this whole period of April 1st and until the election day. So it's elections are changing. This is not a static process, and this is not static voters' behavior. And our answers and voters' concerns are changing as well. So more work to do, definitely. But I think engagement from our side, engagement from the voter side, we will keep the process in check. Again, guarding the process, its integrity, and people's trust in the election process is the key here.
Boris? Okay.
Yeah, I would just add, I mean, this type of forum is just as important as any technology that could be developed or you know, law that could be enacted. Educating people and informing them, as Boris said, is, you know, goes hand in hand with the rest of it. And the more people know, the more people are aware, the more we can mitigate whatever risk there is.
Thank you. We'll certainly, before we conclude today, again, pitch the websites that everybody who is watching can use as resources to follow up and learn more about this. And this is being recorded, so if anyone wants to go back and rewatch, they certainly are able to do so. So I don't see any other questions come in. So Nicole, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you, Darcy. Let's see here. All right, well, looks like that is all that we have for the Q&A portion of the evening. Thank you to our esteemed presenters, and thank you everyone for watching tonight. If you enjoyed this free program and want to learn more about the League of Women Voters, work in Montgomery County, you can find out more about us, including how to support our efforts, and join us at lwvmocomd.org. And finally, as a reminder, please remember that the League of Women Voters is a trusted source for election information. Keep an eye out for the print version of our nonpartisan Voters Guide. Leagues produce voters guides all over the country, and it has become a very popular election education tool. The guide includes candidate responses to questions asked by the League about qualifications and important issues. The same responses are also available in English and Spanish online at vote411.org beginning April 1st. And I'll just add that, if you come across information that doesn't sit well with you, be sure to check in with the Board of Elections websites mentioned tonight, as well as go straight to the candidate websites. These three outlets are your best choices when it comes to finding concrete information to make sure you get through this election season unscathed. So thank you again. Thank you to our presenters. Thank you, Darcy. And until next time, take care.
Thank you.